Candace Nelson, we are live. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, okay, I have so much to ask you about because first I want to tell you I am a huge cupcake fan, and I was on a business trip years ago, and not in New York, which is interesting because there are sprinkles in New York, but
Oh, yeah.
I had to go to Chicago, and I was told by someone that I was on this business trip with that I need to stop by Sprinkles, and we did, and it literally changed my perception of cupcakes.
Aw.
I so you are regarded Sprinkles Bakery is widely regarded as the world's first cupcake bakery. How did you come up with this innovation? Because people knew about cupcakes. It's not like we didn't know about cupcakes, but you elevated the cupcake. You made it like a sort of like a destination activity. How did this all come about?
Yes, I grew up in a world of pre-bougie cupcakes. It's hard to believe now, but cupcakes really were just what you found in the supermarket. And I had my epiphany after first, going into investment banking and then working for an internet startup, losing my job in the dot-com bust,
Mm.
but was following this very, traditional career path to success. And after losing my job and then 9/11 happened not long after that, I really was faced with the idea that this path that I had always envisioned for myself wasn't as secure as I thought it might be.
Mhm.
And that if it could all end tomorrow, which is what we saw with 9/11, I had to get really clear with what I wanted out of life.
Mhm.
And I realized that I wanted to be doing something I enjoyed and something that gave back to the world in some way, even if it was small. Even
Mhm.
if it was injecting a little piece of joy into the world through a piece of cake.
Mhm.
So at that point, I decided instead of going to business school, I would go to pastry school, pursue this passion that I had had for my entire life. I grew up baking with my mom and loved it, but never thought I could ever pursue a career in baking. I still had no idea how I was going to do it, but I decided I had to try. We have this one life, and I had to go test this passion.
Mhm.
So it was after that that I was walking through the supermarket and noticing these very sad cupcakes,
Mhm.
literally just kind of tacky, right? I mean, the frosting was made with shortening, the decorations were these plastic cupcake picks,
Mhm.
and they were packaged in plastic clamshells. And I thought, it's time for the cupcake to have a makeover.
Mhm. And you did it. Well, and in terms of then this idea, this because I know that one of the things you talk a lot about is thinking innovatively about
Mm,
something that, letting your mind kind of have this play state so
mm,
that you can think innovatively.
mhm,
One of the things that I think is hard for entrepreneurs when you get an idea is that people tend to not get it, right? Because it's not out there yet, let's say.
mm,
I mean, you're the first kind of doing it. You have talked about the fact that when you tried to find space, right, a
mm.
storefront, you had a lot of landlords who said no. How did you get the one who finally said yes to say yes, to let you open this cupcake store that everyone else didn't want you to do?
Well, the short answer to that question is persistence and resilience,
Mm.
because the landlord who ultimately ended up saying yes initially had said no.
Oh,
But
wow.
you're absolutely right. Everyone thought this was a ridiculous idea.
Mm.
Entrepreneurs really are visionaries in a sense. They see a vision for the world that a lot of people don't see, right? You're seeing a vision of the future that doesn't exist yet.
Mhm.
So you're going to run into obstacles. You're going to run into people who don't believe in your vision. You're going to have to get used to the idea that you're going to have to get used to hearing people say that will never work.
Yeah.
And the first thing you have to do is stop caring what other people think.
Mhm.
Sprinkles was such a gut feeling for me. I knew intellectually that it didn't make sense, right? It was a cupcakes only bakery. I was opening in Los Angeles where people are not really known for eating many carbs. I was opening at the height of the low carb craze. I
Mm,
was flying in the face of what everyone expected, but I just had a gut feeling that I was onto something. So I first had to completely ignore the naysayers. And I think that's so important, right? I mean, of course, you want to lean on people for guidance and support, but at the end of the day, you have to know that you've got you, right? You've
mm,
got your back and you have to trust your instinct. Balance it with numbers, balance it with, your rationale, your intellect, but ultimately so many of the decisions I've made have come from this other place, this gut.
mhm, mhm. So the this thing that also surprises me a lot about how people think about entrepreneurship
Mhm.
and people who have an idea. And then, I think you've said this, people walked into Sprinkles and they said, "This was my idea. I wanted to open a cupcake shop too. This is something that, I wanted to do."
Mhm.
What do you think distinguishes people who are able to be successful with their idea and those who just don't do it?
Mhm. So there are the dreamers and then there are the doers. And I
Mm,
talk about this in my book, Sweet Success.
mhm.
It really boils down to the action. Just because you have a great idea, just because you have a burning passion, that
Mhm.
in and of itself doesn't get you off the couch.
Right.
And I think I have felt compelled to share my story about starting Sprinkles because I was that person on the couch. I was that person that thought they can do it, but I can't. They're different than me. And at the end of the day, entrepreneurs are just everyday people with a
Yeah.
passion and the courage to get after it.
Yeah.
You have to have the mindset piece. And so much of that is really not being afraid to fail, right?
Yeah.
I did at the end of the day have to sort of have this talk with myself and say, I could fall flat on my face. I could
Mm,
go from having been on this very successful trajectory, in the corporate world to starting a cupcake bakery that everyone said would never work and falling flat on my face. But I
mhm.
knew the litmus test for me is that I would never have forgiven myself if I didn't try. But
Yeah.
you're right, there's a bazillion ideas out there. And when I first opened Sprinkles, people came in all the time and said, "This was my idea."
Yeah.
And at first I thought people were taking something from me. I was like, "No, this is my idea." But it wasn't about that. It really was highlighting the difference between someone who dreams of something and someone who actually starts to take the steps to bring it to life. I
Yeah.
didn't know anything about starting a bakery. That's the whole
Mhm.
thing. But you just take that first step. I call it following the breadcrumbs. Take that
Mm.
first step. That first step will lead you to another step. And before you know it, the momentum starts to happen. You're rolling downhill and it
Yeah.
feels easy.
Mhm. Well, okay, so here's the next question that I think is a follower for people who maybe have an idea,
Mhm.
and maybe they take that first step, but they also say that 9 out of 10 businesses fail, right? And you just mentioned the word failure.
Mhm.
How do you deal with failure? Because every entrepreneur does. So yes,
Mhm.
you were able to get your vision to become a reality that was a success, but I'm
Mhm.
sure that there were lots of things along the way there where you thought this is a failure point. This is
Mhm.
how do you get beyond that in terms of the mindset you need?
Well, I just have to say that our society does a terrible job with failure, right? We try to just stuff it under the rug. We highlight everyone's successes. We don't tell the full story about all the stumbles and the challenges and the failures that, you know, this overnight success encountered before they got to their overnight success. So,
Mhm,
first off, I want you to be inspired by the successes that you read about in the media, but I also want people to seek out stories of failure
mhm.
because they are the most inspiring. The
Yes.
people who have encountered failure and gotten back up, like Julie Wainwright of The Real Real. She was at the helm of pets.com, a spectacular IPO and a spectacular failure.
Mm,
Okay. Where is she now? At the helm of The Real Real. She didn't let it stop her. But I
Mhm.
think the pearls, the wisdom, the growth is in the failure. Study those stories of failure. And that's another reason that I wanted to write this book, is to sort of, you know, pull back the curtain on the failures
Mhm.
and the doubts and the challenges I had, because it's easy to look at Sprinkle's story and read about it in the media and hear about Oprah Winfrey talking about it and think, oh, that was lucky, or that was a rocket ship to success. It never is. That's not the full story.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Well, you've gone from you started Sprinkles, you've had success with that, and then you went on to become a judge and producer of a few different TV shows, and Cupcake Wars is one. I saw that show, loved that show.
Thank
Sugar
you.
Rush, and now, just recently released on Hulu, Best in Dough. So,
Mhm.
can you talk a little bit about how that plays in, those opportunities play into the businesses that you build?
Of course. Well, when we started Sprinkles was 2005. This was long before people were talking about influencers or personal brand.
Mm,
So when all of a sudden we opened to all this just sort of success, and there were lines out the door and we were causing a commotion, of course, who shows up but the media? The media and their
mm,
cameras. They want the story, they want to know what's going on. And so I was in the back of the kitchen just trying to bake cupcakes as fast as I could, sweating with a baseball cap on, powdered sugar everywhere, and someone had to come out and tell the story of Sprinkles and share with the world what was going on. So I sort of reluctantly took off my apron, which is what I talk about in the book in terms of embracing your personal brand. You have to take off the apron and get out from behind your business and be someone that consumers can see and can relate to,
mhm,
because that's going to increase your trust factor, your likability factor. um, Consumers today are really skeptical. They're really skeptical, and they want to support and consume products from companies that they trust and they believe in. And there's
mhm,
no better way to do that than being visible as a founder
mhm,
and showing up with the same brand values that your company possesses. So those, quick little media news hits led to these opportunities on shows. And I have to say that the visibility as the cupcake judge every week on a hit show like Cupcake Wars on the Food Network was invaluable to
mhm,
me in terms of my personal brand, but more importantly to my business.
mhm,
Because even though when we opened, it was a very unusual idea, very quickly, cupcake bakeries started popping up across the country. It went seemingly overnight from being a crazy idea to a very natural
mhm,
business that everyone
mm,
was opening. So all of
mhm,
a sudden, the landscape became really crowded. It became a
mhm,
really competitive industry.
mhm.
And it was one way to really rise above the noise and
Yeah.
establish and position myself as the expert. And every week, that intro to the show highlighted Sprinkles as the original cupcake bakery. And there I was judging everyone else's cupcakes.
Mm,
So I was the expert, and
mhm.
Sprinkles was the leader.
Yeah.
And so I really, really advise, and you don't have to be an entrepreneur at the helm of a brand. You can be an executive, but I really think developing your personal brand, whether it's through writing, thought leadership, speaking, showing up on Instagram or LinkedIn. I mean, all of this is so important these days.
Yeah.
Not to mention, if you develop your own personal brand and you ultimately sell your business or part ways, you take that community with you to
Yeah.
launch whatever else you want.
Mm. Okay, so I want to touch on something that you said with this. You mentioned that you had the media, the press knocking at your door, but
Mhm.
that was not always the situation
Mm-mm.
when you launched the first cupcake ATM, which, by the way,
Good
just
point.
recently walked through a airport and bought a cupcake from your ATM, from the Sprinkles ATM, um, which I absolutely love the idea. The the you you tried to get press, right? You and your team worked on this technology to
Mhm.
create the ATM. It took Can you talk a little bit about this, and then trying to get the press, and then what happened?
Well, it's so funny because the media is fickle. They always
Mhm,
want just like the new news story. And
mhm,
cupcakes were a pretty enduring trend, but they wanted to basically crown the next trend 2 weeks after sprinkles opened.
mhm.
The first few news stories were sprinkles and the cupcake trend, and then the next few were like, "Well, what do you think will be next?" I was like, I think we're gonna be here for a while. Like there's a line down the street. And by the way, cupcakes are not really a trend. They are an enduring American dessert. So I think by the time the sprinkles cupcake ATM came about, the media was just like, we are sick of reporting on cupcakes. Like we are over it. Could macarons come along? Like, what about cream puffs? We need a new dessert trend. But so as I said, the landscape had gotten really crowded, and it's so important to continue to keep moving the needle, keep innovating, we were innovative in our initial, cupcakes only bakery, but then all of a sudden everyone opened up and we weren't so innovative anymore. So what were we going to do next? And the idea for the cupcake ATM came about during a late night pregnancy craving.
Mm.
And I was pregnant with my second son. I had eaten dark chocolate cupcakes basically through both of my pregnancies. And there were no cupcakes in the house. Charles and I just gotten back from a party, and I was having a serious craving. And instead of just dismissing the craving and going to sleep, we started batting around ideas.
Mm,
What if you could get a cupcake anytime, day or night? And
mm,
then we were like, we pay rent 24 hours a day. We should be able to monetize 24 hours a day.
mhm,
And I call it embracing the crazy idea. What if possibility thinking? That's where the innovation
mm,
comes in those brainstorms where you just like release yourself of any rules and dream of a world that maybe isn't possible,
mhm.
but most people probably would have dismissed it as impossible. But the next day we got to work thinking of, you know, calling technology companies and figuring out how we could bring this idea to life.
Yeah.
So we were excited about it. And right before we sort of unveiled this new technology in Beverly Hills, we called all of our favorite friends from the media who'd been so excited about sprinkles for years and told them about the cupcake ATM, and nobody cared.
Mm,
Nobody showed up. So, fine, forget PR. Let's just take it to the people. We opened the cupcake ATM, and someone walking by took a video of it, put it on YouTube, and within hours, it just blew up. It went viral. And
wow.
then all the media started showing up.
Mhm.
So don't let the gatekeepers hold you back.
Yes. Well, and it's also a lesson in what the media is interested in. Yes, they want to break the story first, but
Mhm,
then they also want to know they have to balance that with knowing that that there's going to be an audience for it,
mhm,
right? So
mhm,
that's why it's so wonderful that you again going back to that idea of the no's and the failures, right? You could have said, well, the press isn't interested in this. So maybe we just scrap it or we don't
mhm,
like just not do it in any big way. You
mhm,
did it anyway. And then the press followed. So I love that lesson of think and how it goes into the mindset that's
mhm,
required to be successful doing
mhm,
the kind of stuff that you do. Let's talk a little bit about take a step back to how this all started for you. Were you an entrepreneurial kid? Were you like if would your parents have said, yes, we totally see this is Candace's future. She is going to be a trailblazer in terms of, creating this trend and really building it.
So I come from a very non-entrepreneurial family with one exception. My dad was a corporate lawyer, very
Mm,
loyal company employee, very risk averse.
mm,
So we were a very risk averse family, but I did grow up hearing stories of my mom's grandmother, my great grandmother, who during the Depression years ran several restaurants in San Francisco as a single mom.
wow.
So I had always heard those stories, but I didn't really have direct models of founders or entrepreneurs in my life.
Mm,
I remember having my first Mrs. Fields cookie. Someone had brought it home to me from the mall, and I bit into that cookie and I thought, wait, someone created this business and this person is a woman? Who is this
Mm,
magical creature, Mrs. Fields? And
mm.
I think that definitely sparked something for me. I wrote a book like in second grade called Reach for the Stars, which was all about pursuing your dreams. So I think they would say that I was a dreamer and someone who was really committed and passionate about following my dreams, but entrepreneurship wasn't in the world of my dreams yet. I think I
Yeah.
thought I was going to wear those sharp suits and towering heels and, take on the corporate world.
Mhm. Well, and to make that shift, right? To take that risk of switching, right? You said you started your career as an investment banker,
Mhm.
right? And then you joined a dot com
Yes.
during the dot com craze
Mm.
and lost that job.
Mhm.
How did the inspiration come
Mhm.
for cupcakes when you were theoretically at a pretty tough low place because
Mhm.
you'd lost the job that
Mhm.
that you had and was what you had been working towards.
Mhm. That was a real low point for me. I think they call it a quarter life crisis now, but it was really a time where I thought, what am I doing with my life? Right?
Mhm.
I was on the couch, I'd lost my job. There were no job prospects because the entire, bottom of the internet had fallen out. People were leaving the city in droves. I remember there was like a 6-week wait for a U-Haul because everyone was leaving with the U-Hauls and no one was coming back.
Oh gosh.
So I spent a lot of time on the couch watching TV and loved Martha Stewart, of course, and loved Oprah Winfrey. And today there is inspiration everywhere, right? We can come to your LinkedIn Live and find inspiration. We can go, to podcasts everywhere and find inspiration. There are communities for female founders. There's so much out there to inspire you to follow your dreams, to give you support to build a business.
Mhm.
Back in the day, there wasn't much, but
Yeah.
what I did have was Oprah Winfrey, who actually had a lot of guests who had encountered challenges in their life and obviously had surmounted those challenges and gone on to do amazing things. And then Martha Stewart was just a living, breathing example of a strong woman who had made it happen.
Yeah.
Um, we talked about where I went to college. I'd gone to a really progressive college. And so the idea of embracing domestic arts as my career, I thought was very regressive maybe. So Martha Stewart was really the one who made it possible. She was a strong woman who was owning the fact that domestic arts could be big business. And that was incredibly inspiring to me.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you brought that up because I do think that's one of the beautiful things about what you're trying to do with the book, with Sweet
Mhm,
Success. You want to share insights and
mhm,
inspiration, right? For
mhm.
how you've done what you've done and give other women, other people, the opportunity to find that themselves. Where did the idea come from to write this book, which is really a book about entrepreneurship, right?
Yes. So Sweet Success comes out November 8th, and it is a guide to entrepreneurship. It is also part memoir in the sense that I share my stories of being a first time founder, bootstrapping, building, scaling, and ultimately selling a majority stake in Sprinkles. So I wanted to tell the story from the perspective of like Candace as a first time founder. Now
Mhm.
that I've started other businesses, I'm investing in other businesses, I have more resources to build a team right off the bat, to build a brand right off the
Mhm.
bat. But back in the day, I had to do it all myself and
Mhm.
literally patch it together. It was so scrappy.
Mhm.
And I think that's really what entrepreneurship is about. I really, with this book, I want to give women permission to dream bigger, bet on themselves, and give them the tools to actually do it, to take action towards the dreams they have. You know, a lot of women want to, I heard a stat 60% of women delay starting a business because of imposter syndrome. And
Mhm.
women suffer from imposter syndrome more than our male counterparts,
Mhm.
and we're more risk averse.
Right.
Um, we but again, I want to sort of shake the snow globe on entrepreneurship being so risky. It is. but there's also no security in this other path either.
Right.
And, when you work at a company, it just takes one person to lose your job, your boss. But if you build an incredible brand, your customers love you, they'd all have to fire you for you to be out of work. So I
Yeah.
love that idea. It just kind of helps to reframe the idea of security and safety and how we really view entrepreneurship versus working for someone else.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because I think that there are so many women now who going through the pandemic.
Mm,
And you mentioned this earlier, it occurred to me when you were talking earlier about 9/11 and
mhm,
how that was a moment in
mhm,
time that for a lot of us who experienced that. I was working in downtown Manhattan. I worked
mm,
in the World Financial Center, so right across the street from the World Trade Center, the World Trade Centers, and it was a very it had a huge impact on
of
me,
course.
and I know for other people it had a huge impact on them as well. And in some ways I wonder if fast forwarding to like the millennial generation, maybe even Gen Z a bit, for them, the pandemic,
Mhm,
because it made us face our mortality in a
mhm,
way that, again, for those of us who were close to what happened on 9/11, it made us take a look at our mortality. And I
mhm,
wonder if there are some similarities there in how what it's doing in awakening. And we've all heard about this large groups of women leaving the workforce
mhm,
because of the fact that they just couldn't do everything all at the same time.
mhm,
And a lot of them are turning to starting their own businesses
mhm,
to be the masters of their own destiny, right?
mhm.
And to take that on. What advice do you have for people like that who are just starting and looking to build this thing from basically nothing,
Mhm.
breathing life into it and hopefully growing it?
At first, I just wanna say that you're absolutely right. There are so many parallels to what's happening right now in the workforce, between, the pandemic and 9/11.
Mhm,
People have had pandemic epiphanies. They've left
mhm,
jobs that don't fulfill them. They're looking for professional purpose. They're looking for more flexibility, and yes, a lot of them are turning to entrepreneurship, and in Sweet Success, I'm really hoping to help them with the mindset and the tools to make sure that they succeed, right?
mhm, mhm.
But in terms of giving advice to people who are doing it, first off, congratulations because you took the hardest step, which is that first bit of action, right? And
Mhm,
secondly, I want to say something that actually is really interesting to me. This is advice that they give in the tech world, and it is to do things that scale slowly, right? You
mhm,
would think in the tech world they would be talking about scaling quick and fast, but actually
mhm,
the advice is to do things that scale slowly. That means one customer at a time. That means relationship building, building community slowly, and then
mhm,
that starts to pick up steam. So
mhm,
if you're in a place where you're like, "Oh, it's taking forever. It's just such a slog. I'm not sure if I'm ever gonna make it," you're doing the right thing. You're taking it slow. You're building a true foundation for an enduring business. And
mhm,
again, I wanna, caution you from thinking anything is an overnight success. With
mhm.
Pizzana, which is my pizza restaurant that I'm building now, I mean, we were, let's see, 2 years or 3 years in, and the pandemic hit, and we had to close
Mm,
our restaurants.
mm,
And so 2 years later, we're open again, and now we're growing. But for a really long time, it felt like we were kind of despairing, right?
mhm,
We had built
mhm.
up this incredible business, and we had plans for growth, and we just had to sit there and endure for the length of the pandemic.
Yeah,
As we all did.
yeah.
But the resilience, right? The resilience, the patience, all of that pays off. It just does take one step at a time, particularly at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, and I think I'm glad you brought up the word resilience. I really think when I look at entrepreneurs, male, female, anybody, like anybody who's an entrepreneur, I think that the commonality in what and sort of character traits for those who do it for over time
Mhm.
and are entrepreneurs over time is grit. It's that
Mm.
perseverance. It's that, okay, I just launched this great new business, Pisana,
Mhm.
and here we are starting to build momentum, and then everything gets shut down. And
Mhm.
I have a couple of years where, I can't do, and I have to discard those growth plans, and I have to pivot and do some,
Mhm.
keep the business going.
Mhm.
Why pizza?
Well, it's delicious, first of all. I love all the yummy foods. Yes, pizza is different than cupcakes, obviously, but the through line through both of these businesses is quite similar. It's basically elevating simple pleasures
Mm,
and surprising and delighting people with foods that they thought that they knew, that they were familiar to them, they were nostalgic, but we're serving it up in different ways, innovative, fresh ways. But this really I wasn't planning to go into the pizza business. I actually ran into our head chef at a party, had one bite of his pizza, it was love at first bite.
mm.
And he had just emigrated from Naples, Italy with $200 in his pocket and a
Oh,
dream to open his own restaurant. And so this has been what I've been doing post Sprinkles is really trying to support other founders with their dreams, helping them with their personal brands, investing in mostly female founded and underrepresented startups. And so this book, Sweet Success, is really an extension of that. My
mhm.
goal to mentor and support founders in their journeys as they are just starting, or even if they've begun and they just need a push along the way.
Yeah. Well, okay. So let's talk about a little bit, if we can, about the difference because you launched a business pre social media craziness,
Mm,
right? Sprinkles was 2005. And right.
yes.
So social media was, I think, in very much in its infancy. Certainly wasn't necessarily building brands as it does today. Fast forward to where we are today. What is different in terms of how you think about building your businesses today
Mhm.
and how social media plays a role in that?
Well, it still always boils down to know, like, and trust factor, right? We buy
Mhm,
from the people we know and we trust. And whether that is the founder who you grow to love through your LinkedIn lives or your time on TV or the articles that they're writing, or whether it's celebrities that you feel
mm,
like you know talking about your product, whether it's TV or whether it's TikTok, it's still the same principles.
mhm,
But I do believe in the power of social media, and you're right. Sprinkles early days were pre Facebook even. Well, Facebook was still just for college kids at the time.
mhm,
And
mhm,
then but we were always innovators, right? Disrupting the bakery industry, coming out with the first ever cupcake ATM. And so, and also my husband and I coming from the technology industry, we really saw things through that lens of innovation, being a first mover and being on top of technology in
mhm,
general. So we actually were one of the first small businesses to start using Facebook in really innovative ways. Sheryl Sandberg cited us as one and said, that we were actually one of the leaders. We were using
mhm.
whisper words back in the old algorithm days where it was chronological to drive people into the bakeries. If they followed us on, Facebook, they would know the whisper word of the day. They'd come in and they'd get a free cupcake when they whispered it to the cashier. So it was the beginning of this sort of community building that everybody talks about
Mhm,
now, right? It was the sort of
mhm.
Sprinkles Club, the Insiders Club, and people in the store would watch someone leaning over and whispering to the cashier and getting an extra cupcake, and they'd be like, "What's going on?" Oh, right, I have to follow them on Facebook. So we've always been very focused on this. And I think, cupcakes for sure are so TikTokable.
Yeah.
But right now I am trying to make pizza TikTokable. And I've actually done the same with my own personal brand. I am
Mm.
I am out there loud and proud on TikTok, much to my children's dismay. Although they have to give me a little street cred because I've had a couple viral ones,
Awesome.
and I definitely get a little nod from them for those.
I love that. Yes. Well, and you wrote an article for the Wall Street Journal that was called Why Small Businesses Should Be on TikTok.
That's
And
right.
it is that new platform that is sort of the anti other social platforms, right? Because people are able to create content that wouldn't work on the other platforms.
Right, right. It was Instagram is a very static place now. It is very aesthetic. There's not much growth. Companies that in the past had really relied on Instagram and Facebook advertising are having to turn elsewhere because the iOS upgrade made all of the targeting much less, and you know, advertising became so much more expensive, really untenable for a lot of these smaller businesses. TikTok is a place where you can still make your mark. It's still early ish, and you're not hemmed in by how many followers you have, because
Mm,
it's not just your followers that see your content. If you make great content, it can go viral no matter what.
mhm.
And is the thing, I think, that one of the things that's really exciting to me about TikTok. The other is just that it's fresh and it's
Yeah.
new. And as a creative person, it's an exciting place to be. It's
Yeah.
kind of like you can like have a rebirth on TikTok.
Mm,
And it's just really fun. There are no rules. And by the way, I can and should, it's encouraged to show up in my most raw and authentic state. On Instagram, I wonder if my hair looks good enough to go on the platform
mhm,
sometimes, right?
mhm.
And on TikTok, it's like if you're using a filter, they are going to take you down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a really refreshing place to be after spending so many years on Instagram. I love Instagram, don't get me wrong, but TikTok is a fun new frontier, and it's not just for Gen Z dancing anymore.
No. Oh gosh, it's gone and the pandemic has helped facilitate that, right?
That's right.
I mean, it is a very entertaining platform. All right, Candace, my last question for you.
Mhm.
What do you wish you could tell the young Candace as she was starting out on her journey?
Oh, I know what I would say. So, in the early days, before I started Sprinkles, I did reach out to a few bakers. And one of them, whom I'd spoken to when I was planning my wedding, she almost made my wedding cake. I kept in contact with her. And she said, I know this sounds weird, but keep a journal. Keep a journal at the end of the day in the business itself.
Mm,
I mean, personal journal would work as well, but write down everything that happened, because you get ready. It's going to be crazy.
yeah.
You are dealing with the public. There are going to be, and by the way, she had no idea how crazy it was about to get. But I was so busy that I never started that practice.
Mm,
And I really regret it, because there should have been TV cameras in that bakery. It
mm,
was the who's who of all of LA coming through.
mm,
It was people coming in with their crises, trying to make their day better, people coming in, to celebrate their most intimate moments. We had
mm.
proposals. We were tucking engagement rings into cupcakes and serving them out through the ATM. I mean, it was really an incredible time, and I wish I had all of those stories written down.
Yeah.
But I
Well,
think
it's never too
journaling in general is a great practice, and I've come to it later in life, so I highly
yeah.
recommend you take
Okay,
that.
well, okay, so now I do have to just probe on that for one
Yes.
second because I'm with you. I also later in life came to journaling. I
Mhm,
absolutely love it. I think it's one of the things that is so critical for women. I think women understand that self-reflection is important, but I
mhm.
think a lot of women struggle with either having the time to do it
Yeah.
or knowing how to do it. And for me, journaling has been such a great way to do that.
Mhm,
And I'm just curious if for you as an entrepreneur, as a woman kind of who has a full, very busy life,
mhm.
how does the journaling, does it do that for you? Does it help with from for self-reflection?
Absolutely. I'm one of those people that doesn't know what I think until I write it. I
Mm,
am much better with the written word, and sometimes I wish
mm,
that we could just have this podcast, like, I could write the answers and it could just be flowing and narrated, because I'm much more eloquent in the written word, and that's why you should buy my book. But no, I think that it's just so clarifying to write things down on the page, and even if you're not trying to write beautiful prose, there's a thing called morning notes,
mm,
which you just scribble in a journal for 2 minutes and get all of that like gobbledygook in your brain out onto the page.
Mm,
And it's amazing how much more clear you are starting your day. It's just like taking out the trash, right? So that you can
mhm.
start your day fresh. And it doesn't seem like it would make sense, but it really does.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, The Artist's Way. They have morning
Yes.
pages in The Artist's
Yes, that's
Way.
right. That's right.
Love that. Love that book. Well, all right, if people wanna follow you, find out where they can get the book,
Yeah.
where they can learn all about and keep up with what you're doing, Candace, what is the best way for them to do that?
Well, I am on LinkedIn and I am at Candace Nelson on Instagram and TikTok. If you are interested in buying my book, and it is pre November 8th, I'm not sure when this is coming out, there are some fun pre order bonuses if you go to readsweetsuccess.com. So READ sweetsuccess.com.
Thank you so much, Candace, for spending this time with us today and sharing all of the great insights and being so generous. It's generous spirit that I love. I love it and I appreciate your time.
Well, right back at you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for everything you do for women.
Thank you.